Hello and welcome, my fellow blue veins. You'll have to excuse me, I'm fighting some allergies if I sound off. My medicine just hasn't kicked in yet, and I really wanted to get this video out because I'm trying to post pretty frequently. So, this one is about the historical Blue Vein Society and who is a blue vein. And I figured that'd be good since, I got to explain my namesake, the name of the channel, and, what are the general aims here and where does it come from? So, and this time I made some notes. So hopefully I won't be too scattered, but, bear with me if I am. I'm a bit of a rambler, but we love that about me. Anyway, so basically, the Blue Vein Society was never like a real society so much as just it's like a bunch of random societies, organizations, fraternities, sororities, churches, social clubs that just, had some pretty strict parameters regarding the way you look. So it stems from the mulatto elite that came from white paternal and black maternal lines during slavery. And that specific orientation is because that's how this mulatto elite became elite. Men, especially white men back then, were the ones who held pretty much all the power and resources and money. So if you were the mixed race child of a white man, you had thought, once again, this goes back to my whole black dad versus white dad video, but, more antiquated back then, it made even more difference. Because if you had the opposite pairing and it was a white woman as your mother and a black man, whether he was enslaved or free, I mean, it was worse if he was enslaved, but you really didn't have any money, resources, or anything unless she had a very forgiving family, because she pretty much committed social self-deletion. You know how YouTube with the censorship is. So you know what I mean, though. That stigma would have ended everything. So usually this mulatto elite came from, white paternal and black maternal lines during slavery. They had more resources, more education. And that's sort of where this whole idea came from. They gate kept very thoroughly. They had different litmus tests and criteria to make sure that they were among their kind. So not just making sure that, you were educated and you had the requisite mixed race heritage of primarily European and then African American and other ancestries, but also they also would use things like the paper bag test to make sure that you were light enough. Now, paper bags can come in different colors of brown, so I'm not sure if there was just one. Because I mean, if you take paper bags from like different places, and you'll see that there's some variation. So I'm not sure if there was just one kind back then, but basically the darkest you could be and still pass the paper bag test is like a light caramel, a very light caramel. So you had to be fairly light skinned in order to pass that. And then, if they used anything like the, here's the thing with the paper bag test, that's also been disputed a bit, but that has more historical evidence. There's a whole lot of testimony of people talking about like they would literally just hang these paper bags outside of church doors, social gatherings and whatnot, and you could not enter unless you were lighter than that. So I believe them. I don't think all those people were lying. So, they used the paper bag test for complexion and stuff like the comb test to make or actually it was a pencil test. It was like a comb in the sense that, well, there was the comb test, actually, the one where it was like a fine tooth comb, if you could bring it from root to tip without it snagging, which, I mean, good luck even on a straight-haired person's head because all hair tangles. So I'm not sure how factual that one was, but I heard about the pencil test where you put the pencil in, and if it drops, then you make it into the club, but if it gets stuck, then you're too black or something. But basically all of those were just different physical criteria tests to try to gatekeep So to make sure that you have the mixed heritage, no pretenders or anything like that. They really wanted to get with their own kind, and that's actually fine. I think that's a good thing for any body, honestly, to seek that sort of association with their own. However, going back to this these physical criteria, the paper bag was to make sure you were light enough for those veins to come through, hence the whole Blue Vein Society. And the reason it was the Blue Vein Society is because your skin actually has to be pretty, and not just light, but have pink undertones in order for blue veins to show. Now, green veins are far more common because those can show even when your skin is like deep caramel. And that's why, once again, this society came to be known as the Blue Vein Society. They wanted to make sure you were mixed enough and light enough for the blue of your veins to show and not just green. Now, even white people might not have blue veins, depending if they're very olive toned and have that sort of undertone. So even white people might not necessarily have blue veins, but that also just shows how the American history, shaped this. Most slave owners came from Western or Northern European stock. Very few swarthy or olive people in those groups, hence why their mixed race progeny would not usually be too olive either. So the whole blue veins thing. Now, my own veins are a mix, just like me. And I have like an equal number, but basically I have both green and blue. And I imagine so long as you showed some blue, you were in the club. So there you go. And what I also liked about the Blue Vein Society and why I chose it as my moniker is they were all about bettering themselves, and not just with the whole getting with lighter people or anything, because a lot of them just wanted to get with the people just like them. It was all about making sure everybody was very educated, keeping and concentrating those resources, and just amassing wealth and networking and making way for greatness. And I'm all about that. I love that. I chose my mates and my fate in a very similar way. I've been private school educated. I went into a career briefly before I became a stay-at-home wife and mother, and I married a very educated man with a great career, who is also a blue vein, although he has very little African ancestry and none of it is direct. So in a way, I kept with those ideals in my own life. And when it comes to, some people think that's controversial for some reason, because apparently black love is fine and black people having black clubs is fine. And everybody's too scared, I guess, to talk and get mad at white people for doing that. And, white people have their white clubs and white this and, and their whole white power thing. And all, people look down on that, of course. But, nobody looks down if white people get together and look for another white person. They think, okay, that's normal. Any, Asian, whatever, everybody's like, oh yeah, that's normal. They have a culture that they share and whatnot. Well, I think it's the same for us beige beauties and blokes. I think that it is perfectly fine for us blue veins to want to get together and keep it light and bright. I don't think that that's a problem. Why wouldn't you want your children to look like you? Why wouldn't you, So I think that a lot of the rhetoric against us getting with others like ourselves and associating with others like ourselves is simply because of, I think, the fear of anti-blackness, because here it is, we are almost completely out of the black community. By the time you're a blue vein, there's been significant mixing and you're probably not even majority black. So I think a lot of people, especially in the black community, black Americans specifically, they fear a superiority complex among us. But honestly, I think that has more to do with an inferiority complex among them. As you can see, there's just too many videos all throughout YouTube about this sort of thing. And that also brings me to why I even made this space. Um, it's it seems oh, okay. Like I said, I was on YouTube prolifically as a commenter under a different name though. Um, this is a new channel, new name, so I don't know if people wouldn't be able to connect them, but I used to comment very prolifically on in channels in the mulatto sphere, the golden sphere, the exoticals, all of that. And there were just so many issues in all of those communities. The mulatto sphere and golden sphere, the men tended to be misogynistic, bordering on incels. Like, just a lot of that hate started to bubble through, and that gave me the ick. I couldn't stick in those communities. And then um, also, the women in the golden sphere who have channels tended to almost be just too walking on eggshells too much around their black audiences for fear of coming off as anti-black, not wanting to be too confident or happy about their appearance or anything that they have, because we wouldn't want to be colorist or texturist or anything. And honestly, nobody else has to go through this. Like, everybody's allowed to be proud of who they are, and that's just okay. But when it comes to us, apparently we're not supposed to be proud or wear all kinds of wearing pointy white hats and stuff. So I just thought that was ridiculous. And then when it came to the exotical faction, that was disappointing, because I had joined so many channels. I was so excited. I thought, okay, here we are being unapologetic finally, really embracing our features and all, only to realize as time went on that a lot of these so-called exoticals, as per the current scandal with one of the more famous ones, they're fakers. A lot of them are actually self-hating black women who objectify and want to be the mulatto quadroon. And mind you, I'm going to use some antebellum terms sometimes because it's specific and it works for me and I'm not offended. So if it offends you, I don't know, but you're going to hear all kinds, not just biracial and MLS from me. But anyway, they seemed to really just, it was all like a play, like just straight up play pretend, and they would all go on and on about their features, which a lot of them didn't even have naturally. They're out here bleaching, wearing all kinds of type 2 and 3 wigs, but talking about how much better their skin is and their hair is than a black person's. And it's like, that's not even your natural skin and hair, but okay. So, and then the eye surgery, don't get me started. That's crazy. Trying to go blind over getting some blue eyes or something. And that's not even the prettiest eye color, but that's just my opinion. That's why this is called blue veins and not blue eyes. That's not my favorite, and I don't have blue eyes. So it was disappointing. I was very excited for a while and a part of those groups until I realized it seemed like the huge majority was just a bunch of fakers, a bunch of monoracial or otherwise very unambiguous black women who either for their own nefarious reasons were trying to stoke flames of discontent and discord between mixed and black women, or if they were just that full of self-hate that they were finally excited to be able to seamlessly have this alternative identity in life. They used to do this even when I was a kid, but it was before the internet, so they couldn't do it for long and they'd get called out a lot faster. I remember being a kid, in the 80s and 90s, most of the 90s, of course, and kids were pretty rude. They just didn't care, no filters. So kids would come up to me and just be like, oh, what are you? What's your mom? What's your dad? And, I would answer, oh, my mom's this, my dad's that. And, kind of the way you always ask how are you back when someone says how are you, even though if you really don't want the conversation, you don't really want to know, you're just asking as like a formality to be nice, polite. So even though these girls were black and I could tell they were black, it would just reflexively come out like, oh, what are you? And without fail, like 90% of them would be like, oh, I'm German, French, English, Polish, blah, blah, blah. Like they would name like all these European ethnicities, maybe some native ones, and then throw in black at the end like an afterthought. Meanwhile, they look like an entire West African. So I would just look at them like, really? Like, are you serious right now? I'm supposed to, but you have to be polite. I'm like, okay. So it seemed like in these YouTube streets, it's just constantly happening in the exotical space. A lot of them are just pretenders. And once I realized that, and you know, a lot of the clues came in because, when people get upset, first of all, like I said, I don't use Fenty. I'm not a Rihanna stan like that. I don't care. I have my own makeup I really love. And so I don't really know, but they always go by the Fenty shades, the Fenty this, Fenty that. And I've looked at them just so I can be able to even relate to the conversation. And so I remember I said, I made mention that like anything in the Fenty 300s is technically not light skinned. It's medium or caramel because there are no light, bright caramels. Like, what kind of caramel are you eating if it's yellow? Like, that's weird. Your caramel's supposed to be some sort of brown. So it doesn't make sense to get upset or offended, but they sure would. Oh my God, so many arguments and that's when I realized, like, okay, there's no way y'all are light or ambiguous if you're really so offended at the idea that caramel skin is not light. So that was a bummer. And I was like, I don't like that there's no real space for people like me who have lived their entire life, straddling the color line, being confused for every and any ethnicity under the sun, except for straight up black, and all the unique experiences and challenges that come with that, especially when you still have ties to the black community and, your other community, whether it's white, Latin, Asian, what have you. However, like I said, in the context of the Blue Vein Society and in my own life, we're primarily talking about people who are mixed with European as opposed to anything else. And like I said, my father, he's a Latino man. He's Puerto Rican, but he's white. So it's the same pretty much. Now, going back to that whole elevation thing, I'm not strictly on some, colorist, and that's the thing. I don't even think it's colorist, to want to be with people like yourself. But it's not even just about color. I think it's important to push that sort of elevating the race, adelantar la raza, but not purely racially and color wise. Like, let's make sure we're only getting together with educated people and getting married to educated people with money and resources before we have children, because this is a tough world. And if you want greatness for your people, you have to set up greatness with your own choices. So I'm a big fan of that sort of thing with the Blue Vein Society, fictitious or not. And so that's this channel. This is a channel for if you're trying to be upwardly mobile and stick with other upwardly mobile people, and especially upwardly mobile people like you, ambiguous, kind of living life on the color line with connections to all of your racial makeup and the unique experiences, and wanting to form community and not just have to disappear into one community in order to have community. That tends to be what happens to us. That's why you usually don't see these spaces on YouTube really do much, because true blue veins are so ambiguous. We're usually a foot out of the black community already. And most of us just looking at the world, looking at our own privileges and the stigma against our darker brethren, we usually just choose to end up in another community anyway. So I wanted to have a space where we don't necessarily have to do that. We can just find each other, and have community. And in that way, if somebody who is a blue vein, a highly ambiguous mixed race person wants to get with another highly ambiguous mixed race person, maybe it won't be so hard. There will be a name, there will be a group, there will be, and I'm not saying it has to be Blue Vein Society like in history, because some folks certainly don't like that. But I also don't believe in apologizing for those aims, those goals, or who we are and what we look like. I'm very proud to be a beige beauty, and I love my blue veins showing through my skin. I think it's cute. It makes me feel like those like queens back in Europe with the how they would powder and then draw on their veins on their breasts for their décolletage, and how it made them look, it was all regal and stuff. So, there's pride in all of our identities, and I don't believe in having to walk on eggshells or not being allowed to gatekeep. I don't want what happened to the exotical community to happen here. I don't want a bunch of pretenders and fakers, or people who are going to try to make us feel guilty for who and what we are, because that's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody else has to go through that, and I refuse. And so, yeah, if you're a loud, proud blue vein and you want to be where people like yourself are, and making those upwardly mobile choices and be in a place where we can talk about all those things, this will be it. I'm going to do a lot of videos about the history of our people, current celebrities, current drama, my own story times. And because when you're a blue vein, when you're highly ambiguous, you are going to have some very interesting experiences all around the color line and all over the world and whatnot. So I've certainly got a lot to say about that. And so, yeah, if that sounds like your kind of people, your kind of thing, stick around. But in a nutshell, that's what the Blue Vein Society is, or was. And that is my current iteration and interpretation. And if you want to be down, stick around. So until next time, catch you later, Blue Veins.